I'd love to own 100% of it. But that's the test. Would you like to own 100% of a company? If you're going to buy 5% of it, we're not buying a stock when we buy Apple in our minds. We're buying 5% of a business. We buy 100% of some businesses, and when they're publicly held, we buy 5%. But we bring the same thinking to it, we like very much the economics of their activities, and we like very much the management and the way they think and the way they act.
Andrew?
One of the other questions, Warren, that we didn't get a chance to ask over the weekend was one about USG. This is a transaction you've been involved in. You've historically avoided what are described as hostile takeovers and said you didn't want to be involved in them. This one's a little tricky because the USG, in this case of USG, you have effectively backed a company that is trying to effectively take over USG. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we bought USG first 18 years ago. We made a substantial investment. In 2006, the company went into bankruptcy twice, and the company faced these huge asbestos claims. And we backstopped single-handedly, Berkshire did, a 1-for-1 stock offering, which is very unusual, and we backed with $1.6 billion or $1.7 billion. This company coming out of bankruptcy, having a 1-for-1 offering, and then 2 years later, in 2008, when the crisis hit and also hit housing, the company found itself needing money again, and we put up 300 of the $400 million they needed at that time. And 18 years from the time we bought the first stock, and 12 years from the time we, in effect, bankrolled the company in terms of coming out of bankruptcy, we've never received a dividend, and the stock that we backstopped in 2006 at $40 has been selling for less than that. And in general, the earnings estimates, the new products and that sort of thing, falling short. Now, that happens with companies we own, too. I mean, the business can be tough. But when they received an offer from another company that also had been an 18-year-old shareholder and perfectly responsible building materials company that actually competes with our company, Johns Manville, in this country, they made an offer, and the company did not. We own 30% of USG. The company did not call and say, what do you think of this offer, or anything of the sort. They just called afterwards and said that their board had unanimously decided that it wasn't in our interest to negotiate with them or anything. And like I say, we own 30% of the company. And then the company made a second offer, and the German company, Knauf. And again, they were turned down with no negotiation or anything of the sort. So we really felt the directors, who are probably very fine people, I don't know them, but we felt that they did not represent our interest, and that and we said that we intended to vote against them at the annual meeting. We don't have a candidate of our own or anything like that, but we just think that directors are there to represent shareholders, and we did not feel they were certainly representing us with a 30% interest. Since then, the two proxy advising organizations, ISS and Glass-Lewis, have said that they think they recommend a vote against these directors as well. And now the company said it's going to negotiate with Knauf. So that is the situation. That's the first time, I think, in the 53 years I've been in Berkshire, that we've voted against a slate. We withheld our vote at Coca-Cola a few years ago because of a compensation plan, and we voted a time or two against individual issues, maybe on stock options or something of the sort. But it's a question of whether the stockholders should determine what they think the value of the company is. All I know is that for 18 years it has not worked out that well, and management has been more optimistic than subsequent events delivered, and we thought they should sit down and negotiate.
Warren, another question that came up from a lot of shareholders, we covered it some in the question and answers period on Saturday, but I thought maybe you could go into a little more detail on it. Just the idea of consumer packaged goods. Companies like Coca-Cola, which hit a 52-week low last month, even though the company came in with better than expected earnings on issues. And a company like Kraft Heinz, which is down about 35% over the last 12 months versus the S&P being up 11%. It has a lot of people thinking that consumer packaged goods don't have as bright of a future.
Yep.
I think Jorge Paulo may have even called them, saying jokingly that he felt like a dinosaur at the Milken conference recently. What do you think when you look at these areas?
They're still very good businesses. I mean, if you've got a brand, if you look at the return on tangible assets, you know, Coca-Cola or Kraft Heinz or anything, you've got a very good business. It doesn't look as good as it did 5 or 10 years ago. In other words, there's two reasons, I think, for that. One is people seem to me to be a little more willing to experiment with different diets or foods than they were 5 or 10 years ago.
Some people would say healthy diets, where they won't eat things that are packaged. They think that's bad for them. It's a millennial attitude, too.
Yeah,
they won't buy some of the old brands.
There's certainly, that's a factor. I think it may even extend beyond millennials to some degree. People are more, well, they've gotten used to more change in their life generally. So I would say that there's still a huge loyalty factor, and but it is not as strong as it was 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. And secondly, there's always been a struggle between the retailer and the brands. I mean, you can't. I mean, that's built into the American market system. And I would say that the retailers. And they've always had private label brands. In some other countries, private label has been much stronger than the United States, for example. And the private label brands are priced below the big brands. And the retailer, every time a retailer meets up with a packaged goods salesperson, they're arguing for lower prices and better deals. And I would say that their hand becomes stronger as the Costco's and the Walmarts and in other countries, as they become stronger, the struggle can tilt a little bit one way or the other. I think a few years ago, I think Costco dropped Coca-Cola, and that's a real test if you want to. And of course, Sam's Club at that time started pouring it on with more Coke and everything, and that Coca-Cola's a pretty strong brand, so that Costco could decide to do that. But if Costco decided to drop a bunch of other brands that you could name, or Walmart decided to drop them. I mean, the packaged good company might feel it more than the retailer would feel it, and they would come to terms faster. It's an interesting dynamic, and it's gone somewhat against the packaged good companies. They're still good, very, very good businesses.
Is that dynamic between the retailer and the packaged goods companies, is that a pendulum swing that swings back?
I hope so.
Or is this a new...
No, and not necessarily. No, I mean, you've got these German discounters coming over here now, and each company's got some muscle. And if you've been selling, whether it's Coca-Cola or, you know, whatever food you may have eaten as a kid or something like that, I mean, you're pounding, you want the consumer, because you got to win with the consumer in the end. You've got to have a product that's strong enough that the retailer has to carry it to some degree, and where their private label, even though it's priced below it, does not draw volume away. And if you take Heinz ketchup, it's very, very, very hard to take share away from Heinz ketchup. It's hard to take share away from Philadelphia cream cheese, but I could name some other products where it's easier to take share away. And the consumer votes every day, and some things are affecting the consumer, like the feeling that other things are healthier or something of the sort. Price affects the consumer, but just the prevalence, the strength of the retailer can affect the consumer too.
Is that why there's so much pressure for some of these packaged goods companies to get bigger, for new deals to come in? Like, I'm going to take and wrap up with a lot of products, and then I have more heft against the retailers if they try and jerk me around with
you
my
don't
brands.
get if Coca-Cola were to buy, they've got the the world's greatest distribution system. So they can push liquids through that. I don't know whether they could push cream of wheat, you know, or something through their distribution system. Obviously, a great distribution system is worth an enormous amount, and like I say, Coca-Cola has a great one. And Coca-Cola, incidentally, you know, they're selling 5% more liquids. They are selling 100 ounces of liquids per capita in the whole world. 7 billion people are drinking a Coca-Cola product, and they're drinking at the rate of 100 ounces a year. That's substantial. Leaves a lot of ounces to go, but they're selling more ounces of liquid. They've got more brands now, but they are selling than they've ever sold, and it grows year by year, and it's growing. And James Quincy is doing a sensational job on that, and first quarter even showed it. But if you've got a brand that's kind of lost out there or something of the sort, it's hard to get shelf space, and the retailer is going to stock what will move, and sometimes that involves price. But what you want to have is a product the retailer has to have.
There are a lot of subjects that drew some controversy and got a lot of headlines from this weekend, including some back and forth between you and Charlie and then Elon Musk. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but I think we need to take a break. So, Joe and Andrew, we will send it back to you in the studio, and we'll have more on that coming up in just a moment.
All right, Beck, you got a Wall Street Journal out there, too? Beck, you got one?
Right here. What do you want me to look at?
Warren, you may have already seen this Neil Ferguson piece, because it echoes some of the stuff that Warren was saying about this China skirmish that we're having. Yeah. Very
All right, I'm giving it to him right now, Joe, so he can take a look at it. It's in the op-ed page. He'll read up on it and be prepared.
Excellent, because like Mr. Buffett, I think they think that it's something that, because of the changing relationship we have, and things have changed since Chimerica actually came about, and, you know, China's done well, and they need to come into the real world. And maybe we're not wrong to be doing it this way. That's the thrust of the piece. Anyway, I would like...
That's a good tease, too. We can talk more about that.
Yeah, I'd like Warren's comments or at least thoughts on that. We'll have more from Becky and Warren Buffett on the other side of the break. In the meantime, let's get you caught up on the markets. We had Katie Stockton on last Thursday, and she was saying thought the trend would reassert itself positively. And suddenly on Thursday, we were down 400 points, well below 24,000. But it closed up 5 that day, and then another positive session, and suddenly we're about 700 points above the worst levels after she was on, as it did reassert itself. There's the futures up 100 this morning, just about on the Dow Jones. The NASDAQ up 45, and we're watching oil this morning. Saudis reportedly want $80. They'd like 80, and they seem to be getting their way this time around. The 10-year note, still below 3%, though, 296 when I looked this morning. We'll have 295.9 now. We'll have more Squawk Box coming up in a minute with investing legend Warren Buffett when we return.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Omaha, Nebraska, where we are live with Berkshire Hathaway's chairman and CEO, Warren Buffett, coming off of the 53rd annual shareholders meeting for Berkshire Hathaway. Warren, again, thank you for your time this morning.
Glad to be here.
There are so many things that we wanted to talk to you about this morning. One I've kind of been holding off, waiting to get your comments on, is Elon Musk. Elon Musk was brought into the conversation this weekend at the shareholders meeting by a question. I forget who asked it, one of the shareholders maybe, bringing up this idea, or maybe it was Andrew. Somebody brought up this idea of moats, competitive advantages and moats. Elon Musk recently said that he thinks moats are stupid.
I wish he'd give me his.
And that became a subject where Charlie weighed in and said, yes, he's right that actual moats around castles are stupid. But you guys got into a little bit where you were joking around, saying that you'd like to see him try and get into a candy store. He responded this weekend with some tweets saying, I'm starting a candy company and it's going to be amazing. I am super, super serious. It just occurred to me that the plot of Willy Wonka is really messed up. Okay, just for the sake of argument, what do you wish for in candy? Crypto candy. Then I'm going to build a moat and fill it with candy. Warren B. will not be able to resist investing. Berkshire Hathaway, kryptonite, I'm killing me, LOL. What do you think about all of this?
Well, if you look at the leading candy bars, for example, for the last 50 years, I think you'll find Snickers on top, and then you got M&M's. You got two types, so they don't combine the peanuts with the other ones. But I think they're number 2 and 4, and Hershey's in there number 3 or something of the sort. Yeah, I can't take them on. I don't think Elon can take them on. They have moats. When you go into a drugstore, 7-Eleven or something, and you say, I would like a Snickers bar, and the owner says, oh, I've got something, the Musk bar at 10 cents off the Snickers bar. You say, give me the Snickers. And if he doesn't give you the Snickers, you go across the street and buy the Snickers. The brands are moats, I mean, obviously. And if you try to, this product is selling, to hundreds of millions of people who want Coca-Cola. If you say, I'll sell you something for 2 cents less, or I've got some celebrity's name on it. They actually, Richard Branson tried Virgin Cola in the United States about 15 or 20 years ago. And a million others have been tried. So I don't really have the same urge to produce automobiles that he apparently has to produce candy. But I don't suggest that he take on Snickers.
You're taking me literally and stepping away from the real story here, which is kind of this war of words between you and Charlie and Elon. And I just want, do you even know Elon Musk?
I've never said anything negative about Elon. I mean, you're baiting me a little bit to do it. But,
I am.
But I've never, people like his car and everything. But somebody mentioned that now he's talking about financing. Something this morning about that. I thought I heard that earlier.
Yes, well, actually, Andrew just read some headlines where it looked like Tesla may be going back to market to pick up some additional financing. I'm not entirely sure. All I heard was the headline.
That's what I call a counter-revelation. I mean, Charlie, because I think it was just a few days ago they said they wouldn't need financing. But he's trying something to improve a product, and I salute him for that. And the American public will decide whether it's a success, and it's not easy. It's probably easier to develop a new car than to compete with Snickers. But some products have terrific moats. Probably Elmer's glue does. WD-40. I mean, there's just certain things that you are not much inclined to be dissatisfied with and see. And I would say that, incidentally, that the iPhone. Has a terrific moat. I mean, people that have an iPhone, or maybe have some other phone, but they want to continue with the product that they've got. They want the new version. It's just easier for them. They've learned how to do everything, and their life's built around it and all of that. And moats are very useful. Costco has a moat in people's mind. I mean, Amazon can raise the price of Prime, 20%, and you can't do that unless you've built something within that image of the Amazon Prime that's based on reality, that you're going to get a lot for your money and you're going to want to use it, and then you can raise prices $20. But if you're selling, some commodity product, you can't do that. You need a moat.
You mentioned Amazon, so let's talk about that, because you did say over the weekend that Amazon is one of the shares that you haven't bought that you wished you had. Are you ever going to buy shares of Amazon?
It'll probably be tough. I probably got so many psychological problems with the fact I didn't do it. That's very hard to do it. I always, when I first met Jeff, I knew he was an incredible person. And he still encloses his 1997 annual report, which I read at the time, with his current annual report. And he's extraordinarily clear thinker as well as being a brilliant thinker, and then he can execute. I mean, it's far surpassed anything I would have dreamt could have been done. Because if I had dreamt it, if I really felt it could have been done, I should have bought it then. I knew he would do the most with whatever idea he had. I had no idea that it had this potential. I blew it.
Another stock that you mentioned over the weekend saying you should have known it early on was Google, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, because you knew how much they could charge you when it came to Geico.
Yeah, here we were at Geico paying them $10 or something for every click. I mean, you $10, and no cost of goods sold. I mean, and it produced results for us. That's why we paid them the money. So I had seen the product work. And I knew the kind of margins. I mean, I always said it's great to find something that costs a penny and sells for $1 and is habit forming. This doesn't cost anything, and it's very useful. I mean, if you're looking up auto insurance on Geico, you've got an interest in auto insurance. I mean, it's a very directed way of talking to people. So the real question in my mind, I'd seen Alta Vista before. I used to play bridge on Alta Vista, and what I didn't know was whether there'd be more entrants. I didn't know enough about technology to know whether this really was the one that would stop the competitive race and all that. But I should have done Google too.
You say that Silicon Valley and a lot of the things that happen there, it's not really your field of expertise, but you've been around and you've seen how a lot of things happen, particularly with how Washington can have an impact. The reason shares of Apple were down earlier this year was in part because of the iPhone, but probably also in part because the FANG stocks overall were under pressure because of Facebook, the trouble it got into, the potential for regulators coming into this arena. What do you think, broadly, about some of these regulatory issues, some of these privacy issues, or do you even consider it?
Well, I think about that. But basically, I like good news that isn't or bad news that isn't going to last. And I'm saying that as one of them. But I mean, bad headlines don't bother me. I mean, I had bad headlines when I bought that stock right after 2 or 3 months after Pearl Harbor, and you're going to have bad headlines for a long time. So I am not worried about. We've made the most money when there's been some temporary bad news. I mean, over time. Now, you got to be sure it isn't permanent or something of the sort. But if people get excessively worried about people changing their tastes and what they drink, they're going to drink 64 ounces of something or other, and carbonated soft drinks have lost share. They gain share just steadily for I don't know how many years, practically forever. But bad news does not scare me.
Just to put a finer point on that, though, the regulatory issues concerning the FANG stocks, you think that's just a temporary headline where maybe there's much ado about nothing here, or you're
the
not
regulatory
sure?
issues on which?
On Facebook.
Oh, no, I think that's important. That's important. I mean, if you 60 Minutes had 2 different ones. They had one back on October 8th, and then they had one a couple of weeks ago that illustrated the effect of, well, the fellow said Facebook won the election for Trump. The fellow that managed their operation in the last election out of San Antonio and has been appointed the head of their committee and for 2020. And he, it's a very interesting episode. I mean, they really knew how to target everybody in the country, basically, with things that would appeal directly to them. And that could not only affect them in encouraging the followers to come out, bring out the vote, but it could suppress votes. And I mean, they had Facebook embedded. The fellow used the term embedded there. I mean, so it's a very, very important issue, and I think probably Congress has just begun to scratch the surface of it.
What's different with what the Trump campaign did than what the Obama campaign did 4 years earlier, where they were using Facebook and were kind of seen as like these technology wizards for figuring it out? Well,
they took a first step, and then I don't blame anybody for doing it, but my guess is they thought they were doing it as well in the Democratic campaign in 2016 as the Republicans were, but the Republicans were technologically
advanced.
Yeah, and Obama was advanced for 2012. I mean, the trick is to convince people, but the trick also is to get your vote out, and then the trick, which is really tricky and is very counter-democratic, is to suppress the other guy's vote.
And you think that's the type of thing that will get regulators' attention or will make Congress pay more attention?
A lot of things in privacy will get, people impersonate me,
Yeah, Joe does it very well.
Well, he's doing it to a very sophisticated audience in your case. But if somebody impersonates me on some website and says something I say, I mean, it can be all over the world, and it isn't me. This has brought a lot of new issues that are important issues out, and we're just in the early stages.
Okay, we're going to talk more about this and many other things. We'll send it right now, though, back to Joe and Andrew in the studio.
Okay, Becky, we will be coming back to you in just a little bit. We have that question from Alex Ohanian, by the way, Becky, which we're going to have to ask at some point in just a little bit. But we will get back to them in Omaha, get their thoughts on China and whether or not a trade war is on the horizon. And don't forget, today we're introducing the Warren Buffett Archive, the world's largest collection of Buffett's speaking about business, investing, money, and life. It includes 25 full annual meetings going back all the way back to 1994, with a highlight reel for each, plus CNBC interviews, a Buffett timeline, and a Berkshire portfolio tracker. Be sure to check it out. Buffett.cnbc.com. It is very cool. Squawk Box returns in just a moment.
Good morning again, everybody. We are live from Omaha, Nebraska, the site of the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. Our special guest this morning is Berkshire Hathaway's chairman and CEO, Warren Buffett. And Warren, so many things that we've talked about this morning and over the weekend. One issue is just the economy. And I know you told us last week a little bit about it, that it does feel like things have improved a little bit. Things have picked up steam. I just wonder why you think that, what numbers you see, what are the things that kind of run through your head in determining the Berkshire Economic Index?
Yeah, I see a lot of numbers, and I get them pretty fast. I mean, and business is generally pretty strong. I mean, you could look at railroad car. Anybody can look at railroad car loadings, for example, every week. They come on Wednesday, and you can see them by category, 22 different categories. And I think Matt Rose may have mentioned the other day that 18 of the 22 are up, and overall they're up. And they're carrying stuff because people are buying stuff or adding inventory. And you see it, and you're seeing some inflation connect with some of this. But you see it in some building materials. We've seen it particularly in electronic components. We have an operation most people probably don't even know anything about called TTI, and it carries close to 1 million different types of electronic components. You can order any one of 1 million items from us. They're very small, but people buy them because they're using them, and we have a hard time filling orders and in that business, and that's kept getting stronger now for a year, right up to when we're talking here. So we're seeing pretty good business most places.
The jobs number on Friday had some people speculating that we can't get much lower in terms of an unemployment rate, that it's hard to find bodies to fill the jobs that are opening. Do you experience that?
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, we have a lot of jobs. We have, if you would want to be a carpet installer, you can make very good money, and because there's a shortage of people that know how to sew carpet, and we can teach you to do it. It takes a little while, but that's a very good job. And our home builders, and you've read about this elsewhere, but we have, in addition to having a manufactured housing operation, we have a site build operation, as they call them, and we're in Denver and Austin, Texas, various places, and we have a hard time getting people for certain of the construction trades. And again, we're actually funding a school in Denver. We probably have other participants doing it just to teach people jobs that can pay them $50,000 or $60,000 a year. And now there's employment is tight in some areas. There's no question about it.
What do? Do you end up having to pay more than $50,000 or $60,000 a year? Trying to find out how inflation gets started.
The market system, in the end, if a resource is scarce, whether it's human or otherwise, if a resource is scarce, the price will go. And we are seeing, we're seeing prices moving now in some areas and less resistance to those prices in recent months. This isn't an explosion of World War II scarcity or anything like that. But it's definitely going that direction, Becky.
And then you wonder where that gets us in terms of inflation that the Fed would start to see and potentially act against. And there's so many people who are trying to figure that out.
And I see all these figures, and I don't change one thing I ever do in terms of buying. I've never changed an activity based on a headline in my life that I can remember, or an editorial opinion, or even the facts we get. I'm aware of them, and I like to know them. But it's going to be a different news a year. We're going to own the company a year from now or 5 years from now. But I can tell you, I mean, if you're a policy setter, if I was a member of the Fed board, I would be, I've got a responsibility then in terms of these figures, and I'm trying to steer them to some degree.
But it may not have affected or impacted the decision on whether or not you were going to buy a business, but it does impact your valuation expectations in terms of looking at stocks versus bonds or stocks versus something else. You've told us on this program that inflation acts as a weight on stock valuations, and when interest rates are so low,
it should push up interest rates over time. And it's very easy to talk about having a 2% goal, but it's another thing to keep it from going. Once it starts in either direction, we don't know how well that'll work.
Let's talk about something that Joe alluded to earlier, and that's China and trade. Not just with China, with Mexico, with NAFTA, other things that are happening. But our delegation just returned from China over this weekend. This is Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, Wilbur Ross, Lighthizer, all of them coming back. And now we have to wait and see. We have to figure out if Trump's tough talk will start paying dividends and improved trade relations, or if it pushes us the other direction and leads us potentially into a trade war. What do you think happens? By the way, here's a tweet from the president. I believe this was Friday night. Our high-level delegation is on the way back from China, where they had long meetings with Chinese leaders and business representatives. We will be meeting tomorrow to determine the results, but it's hard for China in that they have become very spoiled with U.S. trade wins.
Yeah, well, the answer is I don't think we will have trade wars because of significance. We will have trade movements, but in terms of the old-fashioned thought of a trade war where you just keep piling it on, I don't think that happens. It's counter to the interests of us. It's counter to the interests of China. It's counter to the interests of every country in the world. I mean, the world thrives on trade, and we would not have the economy, nor would China, nor would the rest of the world have the economic well-being that they have without a lot of trade. And incidentally, in 1970, we exported and imported exactly the same amount. It was about 5% of GDP. So our exports have grown to 11.5% of GDP, which is a huge number now. I mean, but the imports there's about a 3-point gap or thereabouts. And there will always be people trying to get edges and all of that sort of thing. But in the end, China and the United States have a common interest in something very big, and then we have a less than common interest in some things around the edge. The world will not do something stupid over time in trade.
Joe, did you want to jump in here? I know this is an issue you've been following very closely.
Yeah, I would, just a little. I mean, I think Warren probably read this piece, but it is amazing when this alliance, or whatever you want to call it, between China and the United States started back in 2001, it was a different world. And China really was supplying cheap labor and cheap goods, and we were benefiting from that with low inflation. It kept our interest rates low. But the article, the Neil Ferguson article, points out China is no longer an emerging market, and they're looking more and more like us in terms of their economy and consumers and everything else. And at this point, it only makes sense that the trade deficit has to come down. And that's something that's not, you know, it's not unrealistic for the United States to be asking for that at this point. And China shouldn't be shocked and should probably make some concessions. Warren, last week we went back and forth. We said China has more to lose. China said we have more to lose, and we went back and forth with that rhetoric. But the simple fact remains, I think right now, 4% of China's exports go to the United States. Less than 1% of our exports go to China. So, I mean, we can affect them much more significantly than they can affect us. And it's not too much to ask for them for the trade deficit to go down, even though most economists say, well, you shouldn't look at it that way. But, I mean, it's only fair in bilateral trade.
I think it was in 2003, Joe, I wrote an article for Fortune, actually, about the trade deficit. I was worried about it getting too large then because, again, it was getting to be 3% or so of GDP. And it wasn't specific to China at all, but it was just a question of how wise it is to let the trade deficit grow larger and larger, because when you run when you are in effect buying more from other countries than they're buying from you, you are handing them investment funds. I mean, it's the nature. You give them little pieces of paper and they can convert that into buying. They can buy government bonds. They can buy buildings here. And Japanese bought Pebble Beach in the 1980s when they were running a big surplus. I mean, so you are giving up claim checks on our country, essentially, in exchange for having more consumption now than you're producing in this country. And so I do think that there's levels of trade deficit that bother me. I had some system that did not make it country specific. But I think the world has gotten better and better, and there's no question that countries may try and take advantage in this or that, and we've actually been guilty of that sometimes in the past too. I don't think leaders in other countries, whether China or 100 other countries, are not smart enough to realize that it's in the interest to keep promoting trade. The more we trade over time, and we don't want it to be a question of where we import 20% of our GDP and we export nothing. Now, we could all quit working, and we could hand little pieces of paper to the rest of the world, and they could keep sending us food, and they could send us autos, and they can send us all kinds of things. But eventually they have claims on all our wealth. So we do want to have policies where the overall trade deficit does not get out of hand in relation to GDP. And I've been arguing that for a long, long time.
Guys, I'm going to take a break right now. We were going to keep going. We have both Bill Gates and Charlie Munger who are going to be joining us at the top of the hour, but Charlie Munger's here early, and I don't want him sitting on the sidelines, so we're going to take a break so we can bring him right over. And we'll have more coming up with these two in just a few moments. Guys are ready to kill me because I'm calling an audible. But Charlie Munger's sitting here, and I want him on set if he's here. So right now, we'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Charlie Munger, the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. Stick around. We'll be right back. Good morning again, everybody, and welcome back to Omaha, Nebraska, where we have been live for almost the last 2 hours with Warren Buffett, the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. We are joined right now by Berkshire's vice chairman, Charlie Munger, who's sitting down with us and joining us. And Charlie, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
Well, let's talk about this. Between the two of you...
I'm delighted to be anywhere.
Between the two of you, you have 181 years of experience, and you've been doing this annual meeting for 53 years. I thought we could take just a minute or two for both of you to reflect on these meetings, how they've evolved over time, and what it is that you enjoy so much about sitting with each other. Charlie, what do you think? Why don't you start?
Well, it's my hometown where I was raised. And, of course, I like the company and I like the shareholders. and I like the festival, and everybody's having a good time, and we're celebrating values as well as ourselves. And so, of course, I like it.
Warren, what's it like sitting next to Charlie on the stage?
I always learn something, and I certainly get surprised. And Charlie and I, we worked in the same grocery store less than 4 miles from here. We didn't work at the same time, so we didn't know each other till 20 years later. We've got an extremely good partnership, and business is more fun, just as life is more fun with a good personal partner, and to have a great business partner. You know, we've accomplished more, but we've also had way more fun. And Charlie and I, and this is true, we disagree on a lot of things, not that many, but some. We've never had an argument in the entire time we've known each other, which is almost 60 years now.
What's one thing that Charlie's done for you? A decision, an arena, something about your life that you listen to Charlie and you're better off for it?
Charlie has given me the ultimate gift that a person can give to somebody else. He's made me a better person than I would otherwise have been. And that's the most you can do for somebody else. And I've listened to him. Not too many people I listen to, but Charlie, you know, he's given me a lot of good advice over time. And I may hate to take it to a certain degree, but sometimes. But my decisions have been better, but I've lived a better life because of Charlie.
Charlie, has Warren done anything for you?
Well, he talked me out of leaving law practice, which turned out to be a very good idea. Now, Warren, this is a place, Berkshire, where everybody's done a lot for everybody else, and that's why people like it. I don't think all these people would come just to celebrate making a lot of money. They're here to celebrate, I'd say, a set of values. It's like the Catholic catechism.
How so?
Well, it never changes, for one thing.
Yeah. It usually has old guys in charge.
It has old white males in charge, absolutely.
We're seeing the wisdom of that more and more as we go along. Yeah, Charlie was practicing law. I said, Charlie, it's okay as a hobby, but forget it.
I know. He was right. It took him a while to convince me. But I'm a slow learner sometimes.
People wonder how long you guys can keep doing this. Charlie, you're 94. Warren, you're 87. But you made it look pretty easy up there on stage this weekend.
It is easy, actually, at this point. At some point it won't be, but no, I would say it's as easy now as ever. I mean, you didn't see me enter the race that took place over the weekend or anything of the sort. But this job doesn't really require hand-eye coordination or stamina or anything. You know, you just sit at a desk and you apply things that you learned 60 or 70 years ago, and they come in a little different form now, maybe this way or that way. But it's the perfect job for somebody that wants to be working at 80 or 90.
You mentioned that you have had disagreements in ways of thinking over the years. What's the biggest thing that either of you can remember disagreeing on, even though it wasn't a fight or didn't get into anything? Where's an area where one of you thought you should do something, the other one didn't, or vice versa?
I wanted Berkshire to buy the French steak in Costco when the French left.
What year was that?
Oh, that was a long time ago.
I was at a bridge. I was playing at a bridge tournament. They actually called me out of this thing, which is very bad etiquette at bridge tournaments. And Charlie is basically saying the French firm, the big retailing firm there, had about a 15% block or something like that. And Charlie says, "Shut your eyes and buy it." And
he said, "I'm going to shut my eyes and say no."
I should have bought it.
You should have bought it?
Absolutely. In fact, I can hardly think of anything Charlie has recommended that I do that shouldn't have been done. I would do more things than Charlie would, but that's partly because I'm there, 8 hours a day or something. I've got a little more inclination toward action, and Charlie wants to really wait for the fat pitch. I mean, he would be very happy hitting 10 home runs and 10 home runs at bat in the final game of the World Series in his life and just have that be it in securities. And that's the right way to proceed. But I like a little more action.
All right, well, the billionaires keep showing up. Bill Gates is here. We're going to have more from this Berkshire Summit in just a moment.
Billionaires Summit. Fresh from Berkshire Hathaway's annual meeting, Warren Buffett, his longtime investment partner, Charlie Munger, and Microsoft founder Bill Gates join us live in Omaha. Nearly $200 billion of wealth together for 1 hour. A special presentation of Squawk Box begins right now.
Welcome back to Squawk Box here on CNBC, live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Joe Kernan along with Andrew Ross Sorkin, and Becky is in Omaha. Big hour coming up, a Billionaire Summit in Omaha. Berkshire Hathaway Vice Chair Charlie Munger and Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates will join Becky alongside Warren Buffett live. That's coming up in just a moment. First, though, a quick check on the markets. We've been right around triple digits on the Dow, either just above or just below. Now up about 92 on the Dow, up about 10 on the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ indicated up 41 points. The 10-year has been under 3% for a few sessions now, 2.96, 2.95 at this point. And I don't know if you think it's okay to like add up three guys how much they're worth and say that's how that's not what it's about, is it, Andrew? Really?
It's not about money.
Correct me if when you get up in the morning, do you put on one pant? I still put on one pants leg at a time.
One pant leg at a time.
Can you ask those guys,
and
Becky?
these guys do too.
Yeah,
They
find
do.
out. I don't know. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're able to get on a ladder and jump in.
I assure you they do.
They do?
We want to get back to Becky, who is in Omaha this morning, and she has 3 now very special guests.
6 pant legs. 6 legs.
No, my guess is they put their pants on the same way you do, Joe, but I'd still rather hear their opinion than yours. Let's get to our Billionaire Summit this morning. Joining us right now is Bill Gates. He is the co-founder of Microsoft. He's also a Berkshire board member. Charlie Munger is the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And still with us this morning, Warren Buffett, who's the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. And gentlemen, welcome. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Thanks for having us.
I was trying to figure out how to get into these conversations with the three of you, and it's always difficult. The three of you are brilliant thinkers. It can be a little intimidating, but I was thinking back over the years of the times that we've sat down, and you are all very similar in a lot of ways. You're analytical thinkers, you're logical thinkers, you're voracious readers, and you're all people who think knowledge is the ultimate quest. You want to figure out how the world works. But it occurs to me that part of the reason that you're friends is not just because of what you share in common, but that sometimes you have differing opinions on these things. And you probably like to challenge each other on some of these issues. And I thought maybe we could tease out some of those issues this morning where you may not see eye to eye exactly on things. You may have more nuanced views on areas. So I'm just going to throw up some areas this morning and see where you all agree and see where you all differ. And so I'll start with the idea of the markets, because this is where we started with Warren this morning at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. Eastern, I should point out. Just the idea of where the markets are right now. Are they fairly valued? Are they expensive? Is it hard to find things that you like? Bill, why don't we start with you, since you're just sitting down with us. Warren pointed out that it looks pretty expensive to him on a lot of private deals that come along, and it's pretty hard to find bargains in the market. You're a big investor, too. What do you think when you look at the market today?
Well, in terms of absolute returns, you've got the 10-year at around 3%. And so that's your risk-free rate in dollars. So expecting to make a lot more than 3% on things, either you're being smarter than everybody else or you're taking some level of risk. So absolute returns are predicted to be lower over these next 10 years than they've been in most 10-year periods.
Absolute returns on stocks?
On all asset classes. The T-bill sets the rules, the strength of gravity. And so I don't know, if you ask investors, I think they expect to earn, just say state pension plans have 7.5%, a few still at 8%. That's an unrealistic expectation, which makes those deficits a little worse, actually quite a bit worse than they appear on paper.
Charlie, what do you think?
I agree with Bill.
You have nothing further to add?
I have nothing further to add.
All right.
But I accept one thing. I think Berkshire's going to do a little better.
Bill, you agree with that too?
Oh, absolutely.
So what does Berkshire do that gives it that advantage?
We're less crazy. There are certain bad habits we don't have.
Such as?
There are a million ways to be irrational. And while we're irrational pretty often, we're less often irrational than most people. That really helps.
Our bad habits are not financial.
I don't suppose you want to go into any detail there.
I'll talk about Charlie's, but I'm not going to talk about it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the dabbling you all may do. You each have your own money, aside from Berkshire money, that you look and you invest. And Charlie, I know you've looked to China a lot of times when you start looking at places that you like.
The Munger family has invested in China substantially.
Since when and why?
Since about 14 years ago. And I did it because I respected the man who was going to do the investing. And it all looked inexpensive to me, and the companies looked very strong to me. And of course, this worked out. I've done way better than I had any right to expect.
Does it still look that way when you look to the Chinese markets?
I think that the best companies in China are cheaper than the best companies in the United States.
The concern other investors might have before they follow in that way is that they don't know that much about Chinese companies, and maybe...
They're just generally afraid of China.
Is there a reason that they may have some... I mean, you have people who are guiding you who understand China well. If someone was trying to do this on their own, would it be a little more dangerous?
Sure, it really helps to understand the country you're operating in, of course.
All right, that's a stupid question moment. You would not necessarily advise others to do this, I guess is my point, for investors who are sitting at home watching.
I don't think it would be all that hard for any smart person to find 4 or 5 great companies in China to invest in.
All right, Bill, how about you? When you look around, what areas are catching your fancy? I know of things that you've done in the past, areas where you've kind of gotten into currency markets or done different things, but what are you thinking right now? What captures your attention?
Well, my tech investing is almost entirely the Microsoft stock. I think in terms of things that will have super high returns, there are tech stocks that are undervalued. You're just going to get very high variance out of tech stocks because you have some markets where the winner ends up getting a substantial profit pool. Because I don't want to have a conflict with Microsoft, I don't invest a lot in other tech stocks, but I create a fantasy portfolio to see if my predictive power is good or not. Outside of that, I have a team of people who invest, and they're quite diversified. They have a fair bit in China. China looks quite attractive.
Who's on your fantasy technology league?
I probably shouldn't talk about that. I mean, there's some that are still private, like Airbnb, which, at a fair valuation, that's a strong long-term business.
Why?
Because they serve customers globally, and so the reputation and listings they have, you can't just go into one city like you might for a ride service and bomb the prices, go get the drivers and do a lot of marketing and just compete in that one city. Here, you have to have global reputation, global inventory, and so it just makes challenging that leader's position far more difficult.
I mean, I've always kind of thought of Airbnb and the ride services as having some of the similar risks in terms of local regulations that could get in the way with things. Does that not concern you with an Airbnb?
Oh, absolutely. But they're, city by city, they get to deal with that. It's a barrier to entry for other people who come along. The competitive dynamics for the ride services versus the Airbnb are different in Airbnb's favor.
I won't ask you for your entire list of fantasy technology companies because you already told me you wouldn't tell me. But is Apple on that list with Berkshire plowing so much money into it?
Well, Apple's an amazing company, and the multiple's not gigantic. You know, it's not like a tech speculative company where it's still losing money or anything. So, you know, I think Warren's applied, you know, great thinking there. The top tech companies do have a very strong profit position right now, but Apple has the most of all.
And Warren, I guess when you have described this company, the reason you like Apple is not reasons that are technology-based reasons. You think of it as a consumer goods company.
I mean, it's the consumer behavior with the product, what they do with it, how it becomes part of their lives, and all that sort of thing that I observe and primarily reason from. Now, there was something coming out tomorrow that would obsolete everything that made it attractive to that group, you know. Bill would know it before I would, but it has a position in consumers' minds that is, and a utility to them that's very, very, very useful, and it's an incredible ecosystem that they have found ways to profit more from as they've gone along. I should mention that both of these fellows have done way better with their non-Berkshire holdings than I have.
Warren, you don't even have an iPhone, so...
a fellow sent me a 10 the other day, but I haven't, I'm not using it yet. It was a very nice fellow. He even explained, I think he pretended he was writing to his 3-year-old child, and he wrote me this very nice letter and explained what to do with it. It wouldn't bite me or, you know, do anything like that. And I'm kind of screwing up my courage here, and one of these days I'll move.
Charlie, do you have an iPhone?
Of course not.
What do you think about Apple?
I've given up my adding machine.
What do you think about Apple? Do you have a thought on the stock?
Yes, I wish we owned more of it.
Yeah, we talked about it.
I wish we owned more of it.
Why?
I think we've been a little too restrained.
43 billion's not enough?
No.
What do you like about the company?
Well, I like the fact that it's reasonably priced and strong. That's a very desirable combination.
And the management,
I like the
intelligent about how they use it.
Yes, oh yes.
Yeah.
Very intelligent management.
Let me ask you, Charlie, about some comments that you made over the weekend that people paid attention to. My Twitter feed lit up when I tweeted about some of them, specifically when you started talking about Bitcoin as turds. Why?
I'm surprised that attracted any attention.
Why did you equate the two?
Well, Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. Now, that is not something I think the world needs. And the fact that it's clever computer science doesn't mean that it should be widely used and that respectable people should encourage other people to speculate in it. Bitcoin reminds me of Oscar Wilde's definition of fox hunting, the pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable.
Well, that sounds better than what I used before.
We asked earlier, Charlie, Andrew brought it up with Warren, but...
I think it's a scumball activity. Does that serve you better?
Thank you. Yeah. We asked earlier about Goldman Sachs getting into the business of having a trading desk for Bitcoin. Berkshire Hathaway owns about $2.5 billion of Goldman Sachs. Does it bother you, or does it not surprise you? Just...
Well, I don't expect every investment bank to agree with everything I think. They have a lot of animal spirits in investment banking.
Bill, Charlie and Warren have weighed in on Bitcoin. Do you own any?
Somebody gave me some for my birthday, and